Hey guys, Jim here with another video for you. This is 50 Years in Film, 2012. But before we begin, at the end of this video, if you like what you see, please consider giving me a thumbs up, a possible subscribe, but most importantly, leave those comments. I really look forward to hearing from you. Let me know what your favorite movies are from this year and what movies that I should have that I don't have. So, before we begin, we're going to start with the normal caveats. These are not all the films from 2012, far from it. These are simply the films that I own in my collection. And also, this is not a ranking video of any kind. Again, this is simply just a recap of some of the films that were released theatrically in 2012. So, without further ado, we're going to jump around in genres like we always do. We're going to start off with animation. And the first one on the list from Pixar, Brave. As usual, Pixar, they're always of the utmost quality. This movie's no exception. It's a good movie, solid. I wouldn't put it in the same category as like the top tier Pixar movies, but it's certainly a very good movie. But my favorite animated movie that year from Disney, Wreck-It Ralph, featuring the voices of John C. Reilly, Sarah Silverman. This movie's great. I grew up in the 70s and 80s and was a big video game. I mean, I'm the original generation for arcade games, and this movie brought back a lot of memories. I brought my grandnephew to see this theatrically when it came out. He is graduating from high school in like 2 weeks, so congratulations, Ethan. Great movie. Now we're switching over to The Hobbit, or for my Hobbit collection, rather. The first installment, The Hobbit, An Unexpected Journey. Directed by Peter Jackson, starring Ian McKellen and Martin Freeman. I love the Lord of the Rings movies. Absolutely love them. I don't have a problem with them being so long. Each one of those movies is based on an individual book. The Hobbit is a book that's about 125 pages long, and they stretched it out over 3 movies. They could have done the entire story in 1 or possibly 2 movies, but 3, no thank you. Huge disappointment after The Lord of the Rings. Now we're switching over to comedy. The first one on the list is a reboot of a TV series from the late 80s, early 90s, 21 Jump Street, starring Jonah Hill, Channing Tatum, and Ice Cube. This one is directed by Phil Lord and Christopher Miller. Those two are insane. When I heard that they were making a movie out of 21 Jump Street, I thought that was going to be the dumbest thing I had ever heard. And I didn't see this theatrically. I waited until it came out on video. And oh my God, I love this movie. It is absolutely hysterically funny. The sequel is also very good, but this one, yeah, it's a great movie. Then we have Ted, directed by Seth MacFarlane, starring Mark Wahlberg, Mila Kunis, and the voice of Seth MacFarlane. Again, very stupid movie, very funny movie. The sequel I cannot stand, but the original Ted is definitely the best thing Seth MacFarlane has ever done. This movie's funny as hell. Then we have Seven Psychopaths, written and directed by Martin McDonagh, with a great cast of Woody Harrelson, Colin Farrell, Sam Rockwell, Christopher Walken. This movie's got a great cast. This is Martin McDonagh's follow-up to In Bruges. I don't like this movie anywhere near as much as In Bruges, but with a cast like this, and with writing like his, it's a very entertaining movie. Then we've got Silver Linings Playbook, starring Bradley Cooper, Jennifer Lawrence, Robert De Niro, and Chris Tucker. Directed by David O. Russell, I believe. I will double check that in a second. Yes, I was correct for a change. This is a comedy drama. These both of them have serious issues. It's a love story. It's a good movie. I was actually quite surprised. I actually really enjoyed this movie. Now we're switching over into drama. And we have winner of Best Picture that year, Argo. Directed by Ben Affleck and starring Ben Affleck, Bryan Cranston, Alan Arkin, and John Goodman. This is based on a true story of the United States embassy that was taken over in Iran. And this story didn't come out until years after the fact. Great movie. Really, really excellent movie. As is this one, The Grey. Starring Liam Neeson and Frank Grillo. Directed by Joe Carnahan. This movie's awesome. I covered this one on one of my 5 underrated films, I believe. If I haven't, I'm going to double check, because if I haven't, I'm going to. I'll take Liam Neeson in The Grey over any of those Taken movies any day of the week. This movie is awesome. This make a good double feature with The Revenant. Now we're starting to move into action a little more. And we're starting with End of Watch. Starring Jake Gyllenhaal and Michael Pena. Directed by David Ayers. It's not a found footage movie per se. It's they have body cams on. They're cops, and you follow these 2 cops during their, they're actually being followed by a show like Cops. And this is a really good movie. It's really intense. Both actors are excellent in this movie. Very good movie. Then we have Savages, directed by Oliver Stone, with an all-star cast of John Travolta, Benicio del Toro, Salma Hayek, Blake Lively. Yeah, the cast is better than the movie. The movie's not horrible, but it's not all that great. But this one is from Quentin Tarantino, Django Unchained. Written and directed by Quentin Tarantino, and starring Jamie Foxx, Leonardo DiCaprio, and in his Academy Award-winning performance for Best Supporting Actor, Christoph Waltz. Yep, Christoph Waltz was 2 for 2. He won Best Supporting Actors 2 times in a row when he worked with Tarantino, from Inglourious Basterds and Django. And as good as he is in Inglourious Basterds, I think he's even better in Django. I love this movie. It's completely ridiculous. It's entertaining as hell. Then we're back to my Bond set for the last time, actually. And in 2012, we're talking about Skyfall. Directed by Sam Mendes and starring Daniel Craig, Dame Judi Dench, and Javier Bardem. As I said, this is the last disc in this particular box set. Excuse me. There are 2 other James Bond movies coming. I do have those on separate discs. But Skyfall, it was a great return to form after that debacle known as Quantum of Solace. Skyfall is a really great movie. And Javier Bardem is just unbelievably creepy as the villain. Real good movie. Excuse me. Okay, then we're back to my Dark Knight trilogy with the final installment, The Dark Knight Rises. Directed by Christopher Nolan and starring Christian Bale, Michael Caine, Morgan Freeman, and Tom Hardy. As I said, this was the concluding chapter of the Dark Knight trilogy, and it's a good movie. It's not as good as The Dark Knight, obviously. And unfortunately, at the time when this movie was released, there was an incident that happened in a theater in Colorado. We won't go into details. I'm sure most people know it, and if you don't, you can Google it. But it kind of put a little bit of a tarnish on this movie for a little while. Since that time, the tarnish has gone away, and this movie's finally starting to get a little more appreciation. But again, The Dark Knight was an extremely hard act to follow. And as good as this movie is, it didn't quite reach those heights. But again, solid trilogy all the way around. Unlike a lot of superhero series, I can't think of a single one of these three movies that is the weak link. All three of them are great. But let's be honest, the superhero movie that year was The Avengers, starring Robert Downey Jr., Chris Evans, Chris Hemsworth, Scarlett Johansson, Jeremy Renner, Tom Hiddleston, Samuel Jackson, directed by Joss Whedon. For comic book geeks, this was like Mardi Gras. They had been waiting for years for a proper Avengers movie, and this one delivered. This movie was a ginormous hit, and it kind of really solidified the MCU from this point on to be a force to be reckoned with. Great movie. It's better than some of the Avengers properties that come after it. It's not as good as others, but again, like most origin stories, this one's solid. And again, the chemistry among the cast cannot be denied. Avengers, it's a hell of a good time. Okay, now we're definitely into action. And we're going to Safe House, starring Denzel Washington, Ryan Reynolds, Vera Farmiga, and Brendan Gleeson. Directed by Daniel Espinosa. This is a really good movie, man. This movie is not boring. It is action-packed. It was a pretty big, sizable sleeper hit when it came out, but again, it's one of those movies that's kind of been forgotten. We'll probably cover this in a later video, but as it is, Safe House, very, very solid action movie. But this action movie took it to a different level. The Raid, Redemption, directed by Gareth Edwards, and starring, and again, I'm probably going to butcher some names here, so bear with me, Iko Uwais, Joe Taslim, and let me see if I can find which one. Mad Dog. I don't know which guy is Mad Dog. There's Mad Dog right there. You know what? I think The Raid is one of the best action movies I have ever seen. Period. It is just nonstop. The fight choreography, the gunplay, the knife play, just everything. The camera work, the music, the performances. This movie's fantastic. Like I said, one of the best action movies I've ever seen. And there's a sequel. It's coming in a couple of years. Now we're going to switch gears. We're going to switch over to sci-fi. And the first one on the list, Prometheus. Directed by Ridley Scott. And starring Noomi Rapace, Michael Fassbender, Guy Pearce, and Charlize Theron. I just did a ranking of my Alien and Predator series recently. And as I said in that video, in 2012, there was no movie I was more anticipating than Prometheus, because it was supposed to be the big Ridley Scott returns to the alien universe and explains where those damn aliens came from in the first place. Sadly disappointed. Prometheus is not a bad movie, but is sadly lacking. You can tell that they had a general idea where they wanted to go, and then I don't know if it was studio interference or what, rewrites, but this movie definitely pussed out at the end. And Michael Fassbender is probably the best thing about this movie. As I said in that other video, there's a major goof in this movie. When we saw this theatrically, my wife noticed there's a scene where Michael Fassbender climbs up on a ladder and activates a hologram. The camera switches away from him for all of about 10 seconds, goes back to him. He's standing there and the ladder is gone. So if anybody can tell me where the hell that ladder went, please let me know, because my wife has been driving me crazy for over a decade. So hashtag, where the hell's the ladder? Then we've got Looper, written and directed by Rian Johnson, and starring Bruce Willis, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, and Emily Blunt. Oh, and Jeff Daniels as well. This movie's awesome. This is a really cool time travel movie. These two play the same character. He's the younger version of him. And it's great. If you've never seen Looper, please check it out. I did include this one on one of my underrated films, and it's a fantastic, fantastic movie. Then we have Chronicle, directed by Josh Frank and starring Michael B. Jordan and Dane DeHaan. For a lot of people, this was the introduction to Michael B. Jordan, who has gone on to become a huge, huge star. I remember him from The Wire. And when I saw this movie, the first thing I said when I saw him was, hey, it's that kid from The Wire. Wow, he grew up. This movie's great. This is like a found footage movie with a spin on it. And the spin is these guys end up getting superpowers and they're able to manipulate their cameras. And it's just a lot of fun. Again, they were talking about possibly doing a follow-up to this movie. I don't know whatever happened with that. But Chronicle is a lot of fun. Plot-wise, it kind of reminded me of Hancock. I like this movie a hell of a lot better than Hancock. But probably my favorite science fiction movie that year was Dredd. Directed by Pete Travis. Written by Alex Garland. And starring Carl Urban and Lena Headey. This movie's a blast, man. I just talked about The Raid. This movie and The Raid have very, very, very similar plots. And for years, people on the internet are always talking, Dredd ripped off The Raid, or The Raid ripped off Dredd. Both of these movies were in production at the same time. Nobody ripped off anybody, okay? And they are, plot-wise, similar, but execution-wise, completely different. The Raid is a balls-out action movie. This movie is a balls-out science fiction action movie, and it's awesome. Carl Urban is great in this movie. If you're on the fence because you saw that piece of crap from the 90s with Sylvester Stallone, Judge Dredd, and you have bad memories of that, this is the movie that movie wish it was. This movie kicks ass. Then we've got The Hunger Games. This was the phenomenon, and this one started it. And as I have said on a previous video, to me, this is the junior high version of Battle Royale. This has got Jennifer Lawrence, of course, Woody Harrelson, a bunch of people. I've actually seen this one. I've never seen any of the other Hunger Games movies, but I did watch this one with my wife when it first came out because she loves these movies and read the books, and I never did. And this movie's fine, okay? I'm not shitting on the Hunger Games by any stretch. But again, I'm a Battle Royale guy, and once you've seen Battle Royale, this movie doesn't compare. Now we're switching into horror. Back to my Rec set from Spain. Rec 3, Genesis. Directed by Paco Plaza. This one takes place at a wedding ceremony and all hell breaks loose and they're quarantined and blah, blah, blah. I haven't finished this movie. I started to watch it and I ran out of time. I'm going to go back to it. I also need to watch the fourth movie, but what I saw, pretty cool. Then we've got a couple of under the radar horror movies for you. The first one, Aftershock, directed by Nicholas Lopez and starring Eli Roth, of all people, who's a director. He directed Hostel and Thanksgiving, among other movies. This takes place down in Central America, Chile, I believe. There's an earthquake, and after the earthquake, all the services are cut off, and pretty soon people start rioting and raping and pillaging, and these American tourists are caught in the middle. I saw this when it first came out. Obviously, I don't remember much about it. I do know the reason why I got this movie in the first place. It was in the $1 bin at Family Video, so I figured, hey, what the heck, for $2, I'll buy it. And again, I don't really remember much about it, but I do remember that it was decent. Same thing with this one. Antiviral. This one is directed by David Cronenberg's son, Brandon Cronenberg. And it stars Caleb Landry Jones, who was in Get Out. Same thing. I got this out of the $1 bin at Family Video. I have owned this movie for a decade. I still have never watched it. I couldn't tell you if it's any good or not. This one I have seen, though. Maniac, starring Elijah Wood, directed by Frank Calhoun. This is a remake of the William Lustig classic from the 1980s, from 1980 actually, and it's basically it's a shot for shot remake for the most part. You never really see Elijah Wood though. The difference on this one is that this movie is more or less told almost 100% from his point of view, whereas the other movie was a little more conventional. Although Maniac certainly wasn't a conventional movie. But Elijah Wood, I gotta admit, I mean, he goes there in this movie, and it's pretty damn gnarly. It's not as good as the original, but it's a decent movie. Then we've got Sinister, directed by Scott Derrickson, and written by a gentleman who I have a lot of respect for, a guy by the name of C. Robert Cargill. He does a podcast called Junk Food Cinema. I highly suggest it. He also, these two are partners, and they also did the original Doctor Strange movie and The Black Phone, among other movies. This stars Ethan Hawke. This movie's creepy as hell, man. I really like Sinister a lot. The sequel, not so much, and those two aren't involved with the sequel, but or at least not as much. But this movie, especially the home movies, are creepy as hell. I really like Sinister, but I saved this one for last. The Cabin in the Woods. You like my little cover? I love that cover. That's great. This one is written by Joss Whedon and directed by, who did direct this one? I forget the guy's name every goddamn time. Drew Goddard. I should know that by now. Drew Goddard, who also directed a movie called Bad Times at the El Royale that I really like. Cabin in the Woods. Great friggin' movie. This movie sat on a shelf for almost 2 years before it was finally released. And it had nothing to do with the quality of the film. It was because of the movie company was changing hands. This was a little sleeper movie that came out, and I took my stepson, Cameron, to see this when I was dating his mother. And he didn't really, he was just starting to get into horror movies at that time. He was a teenager. And we went and saw this movie, and oh my God, he really liked it, but I absolutely loved it because I sat there for 2 hours laughing my ass off at every inside joke and every homage to every horror movie that I ever watched growing up that I absolutely love. And that's what this movie is. It's a love letter to people who love horror movies. Pure and simple. It's meta, but it's not condescending. Okay? It celebrates those tropes and turns those tropes on their head. And the cameo by Sigourney Weaver at the end of the movie was just a chef's kiss. I was not expecting it in any way. And my God, this movie is just so much fun. Again, one of those unexpected pleasures that I went in thinking one thing, that it was going to be like a Evil Dead type movie. And oh my God, when the twist happens, it is so good. The last 20 minutes of this movie, I would put up with 20 minutes of any movie. It is that good. I love Cabin in the Woods. And that's how we're going to end 2012. I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you did, please give me a thumbs up, a possible subscribe, but most importantly, please leave those comments. I cannot wait to hear from you. We had the poll this week. Planet of the Apes and 5 underrated films tied. So I'm going to be doing both of those videos. I will be doing a 5 underrated video tomorrow. And I will be doing the Planet of the Apes countdown by the end of the weekend. So until the next video, guys, I hope everybody's doing well, and we'll see you then.